stand my ground with the words of the founders echoing around. Liberty's flame in my veins, burning bright. I hold to the rights that we fight for each night. I'm a constitutionalist through and through, proud of this nation, the home of the true. Values that bind us from sea to shining sea, family, faith, and the land of the free. Hearts full of grit with a spirit that's real, living the legacy on freedom.
Well, good day, folks. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist. I am excited about today's guest. I know I always say that, but I am extra excited about today's guest, because she's running for a position that isn't just local. She has the opportunity, if elected, and I believe this woman can be elected, to change California. We can have somebody at the statewide level that doesn't have a D at their name, and more importantly, somebody there that has common sense. This woman was a Democrat. She's running for lieutenant governor. She's been an advocate for parents' rights and for education. So I think that's a great fit for the lieutenant governor. Welcome, Gloria Romero.
It's an honor to be with you on this show in America's 250th year of founding. So it's history.
Amen. It is a crazy world, but most people, we're just trying to get by. In this year of hope, and I see this as a year of hope where there's more patriotism, there's more awareness. How do we harness that hope? How do we turn it into changing California? Because I believe that California has to have politicians that are governing from a place of common sense. So what do we do?
Well, I think the first thing is that we assess our own values. You know, what do we believe? What do we want? Because an election is not just about candidates. It's not about initiatives per se. It's about the people. It's about us. You know, do we believe that we are part of we the people, of the people, by the people, for the people? And I believe that just in watching the events of the last couple of days in Washington, D.C., and really throughout America, to see so much enthusiasm, I think to see a surge of patriotism, I think it's so inspirational. But we should not, and I hope we do not, just let this celebration of America 250 to subside as, oh, that was a great event in July, and then come November, we feel despondent and despair. So I believe that it's up to us, it's up to the people. I fervently believe that. And I know many times we've had setbacks, we participate in elections, sometimes we win, a lot of times we don't win. But then we look to the history lessons of what those 51 founding fathers did to give birth to this nation. And I think, my God, if they could do that, facing the tremendous odds, the very least that we can do, even in a flawed state like California, is just show up and vote. There's really nothing easier than that, and there's nothing more transformational than that. So I think it is up to we the people. We should never forsake on those ideals. We should never give up on the promise of this great land that is America. And California, you know, as Steve Hilton often says, you know, California is to the nation as America is to the world. We are the land of opportunity. We're the Golden State. And I think we are worth fighting for. And imagine, Eric, this year, 250 years of America's birthday, the biggest gift, the most important gift that we Californians can give to the rest of the nation is to basically take back our state. And that means get involved in this election this year, this time, and win, not only for California, but for the United States of America. And I think we can do it.
Most people don't really know what the lieutenant governor does. And it's often just pushed off as it's like a ceremonial position, kind of like the vice president of the United States. I think it's more complicated than that. Can you go ahead and define some of the things that you're going to need to do when you're elected?
Well, this is always a fun question. And, I used to be a university professor. And so I always, whenever I go out on the campaign trail, I usually ask people if they can identify who is the lieutenant governor today. And I will tell you, Eric, that upwards of 90% of people, and that's on a good day, have no idea who the lieutenant governor is. Many even say, I didn't even know we had a lieutenant governor. And so I don't even go on to the next question of what's the most important achievement of the current lieutenant governor. So it is a position of mystery. And I believe it's one not because of the importance of the role or the lack of importance of the role by many people's estimate, but rather because those who have had the opportunity to serve in that position really have not used it in the way that it could and it should be used for the benefit of the people. So who is the lieutenant governor? What does the lieutenant governor do? First of all, the lieutenant governor is basically a heartbeat away from the governor. That's essentially the old, understanding that should something happen to the governor of California, you would be talking with the next governor of the state of California. God forbid anything should happen to a governor who's elected by the people, whether by nefarious, means or by health reasons. So I'm going to set that aside. But basically, you have to be ready, step in, knowing the laws, knowing the rules, knowing the challenges, and basically get ready to be the governor day one. So I'm hopeful that we don't have to face that. Let's go forward. Next thing is the lieutenant governor is the president of the Senate. And this is important because my background was as being the majority leader of the California State Senate once upon a time. And this is important because all nominations for cabinet positions, for secretary positions, to basically form the new administration of, and I hope it's Steve Hilton, I'm supporting him, but whoever it is, all nominations need to be heard by the legislative body, the Senate. They go through a process of confirmation. Well, I have served on those bodies. I've worked in the Senate. I basically say I know where the bodies are buried. I know the rules of confirmation and basically how to move forward. Because once we are elected, we have to move off the campaign trail and really begin to govern. And that means getting a cabinet in place. And what do we mean by that? For example, we have Department of Transportation, so we have a Secretary of Transportation. Our prisons and jails, a Secretary of Corrections and Rehabilitation. We've got Secretary of Water and Environmental Resources. So all of the administration needs to be put together. As the president of the Senate, in the past, many people, lieutenant governors, have just treated it like it's ceremonial. I won't do that because I know the power. And day one, I would sit down with every one of the senators there of all parties. Because remember, we are now governing, and I would want to share the agenda. This is what we're doing. These are our nominees. We want to work with people in a collaborative fashion to basically get the governmental body that we want and deserve, and that the voters have sent us to do. So that's very important, to oversee all of that. Also, I would work very closely with the governor in calling a special session of the legislature. I think we need one right away to look at waste, fraud, and abuse. That's a special session of the legislature, and the governor has the power to call that right away, but it's the legislature that enacts it. So and it needs to come forward. So I would be working with him there. Other areas, and this is the one of my favorite of all, the lieutenant governor is the chief education voice on all things related to higher education in California. University of California, California State University, and the California Community College system. So this is perfect for me. I feel like I'm written for this role because I was not only a product of the system as a student in all three of those bodies of higher education, but I was also a professor. And for many years, and today I do have the title of Professor Emeritus from the California State University system. So, what does this mean? It means then, for example, take Title IX, fairness in women's sports. Do men belong in women's sports? No, shouldn't be. I would be a regent who would have stood up long ago, and we never heard from our regent on this issue, our current lieutenant governor, but I would be one right away at all three of our systems of higher education saying, what part of girls' sports do we not get? I do know what a woman is, and I'm not a birthing person either, for that matter. So I would be fighting for the preservation of what Title IX means and to preserve the rights of girls for girls' sports. That's very important. And it brings about equity and that there are no legal challenges in California. Other areas as well. We've seen, and this was the University of California, San Diego, for example, they sent out a shocking report just about 2 months ago in which they revealed that too many of their incoming freshmen for their last class of admission, they basically can't do math at a college level. And so right away, the students come in and they go into remediation. They basically have to take classes that they should have taken in high school, if not middle school. This is unsustainable. And so I want to restore meritocracy into the system. We have to have a system where if you go to college, you've got to be prepared to do the job. But in the same token, I also want to develop a TK through 16 pipeline to connect the systems because there's a real rupture there. And the three systems of higher ed, I don't believe, are doing a good enough job of working with the K through 12 system of education, where we find over half of our students can't read at basic levels of proficiency or do math. So that's a serious issue. And, I can begin to develop more of a focus on college readiness, at the same time developing and emphasizing and supporting workforce technology, workforce education, career technology, making sure that we get a respect for blue-collar jobs again, and working to make sure that we have this pipeline that's so critical for the economy. So those are some of the areas there. Then also the lieutenant governor, I serve as a member of the Coastal Commission, for example. And you might ask about what does the Coastal Commission do? Right now, it's not doing a whole lot that's very good for the people of California. We've seen half the state of California burn down, from Paradise in Northern California to the Palisades in Southern California. And that's largely because the Coastal Commission and its appointees, plus the bodies that serve, plus the governor, the lieutenant governor, they're all part of this very far left woke worshiping of an extreme leftist environmental agenda, where basically you can allow for, 12, 15 people to be burned to death in Los Angeles because there's not a clearance of the underbrush. There is not sensible fire mitigation, fire prevention policies. And we saw that in the Palisades fire specifically. So there's a lot that's there. You might have heard that the Coastal Commission said in the city of Long Beach, you cannot have fireworks because it contributes to basically climate change. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. They're trying to ban gas stoves, saying that gas stoves contribute to climate change. And I'm saying, no, I'm going to fight for our gas stoves. It has nothing to do with climate change. And I often say, because you can't even toast a tortilla on an electric range or in a microwave. So there's all kinds of issues. I could go on, leading the writing of California's economic plan, serving on international trade delegations. This is a position, if you get the right person, you will have a strong voice, accountability, calling out when we see waste, fraud, and abuse, fighting for the things that we should fight for. So the state of California doesn't have to be sued and we don't have to be burned down to get sensible policy. So there's a lot I could say, but it's a very important position, underrated. People don't know. And that's because people have treated it like it doesn't matter. The fact is, most people run for this seat because they want to fail up. They want to say, one day I will be governor. And so therefore they say this is the next step up. And that's where you get a lot of career failed politicians. That's how we got Gavin Newsom, by the way. He was the previous lieutenant governor before this last one, who's now she's running for another position. They use it to fail up, to basically park themselves at the expense of the people, but they do nothing, they accomplish nothing.
One other thing that I believe the lieutenant governor does is you facilitate business deals. And I see a whole lot of business that was firmly entrenched in California that is run elsewhere. Is there something as lieutenant governor that maybe you could reach out to Florida or Texas and try to get those companies to come back?
Absolutely, in this sense. And the lieutenant governor works in tandem with the governor whenever possible. That's why I'm hoping for a strong Hilton Romero team to be elected in the fall. But even if, for example, if it should not be Steve Hilton who wins, I would still be in charge of and working on trade, on economic development. The number one issue I hear as I go up and down the state of California, it's the economy, it's affordability, it's how do I pay my rent? And not only how do I pay my rent, but how do I save for really, I think, the defining essence of the American dream, and that is home ownership or owning one's own business. So the lieutenant governor is a key person in helping to sustain a thriving economy. And to me, that very much means lowering the cost of what it costs to live in California, housing, energy costs, running a business. I'm a businesswoman as well, and I face some of these issues, so I have vast experience here. It is doing the international trade delegations because export, import, these are very important. Agriculture, for example. I mean, we are the export to much of the world, and so much that we produce, not only in the Central Valley, but in the Napa Valley as well, or in Temecula in Southern California with our wines, for example. So all of these are international trade issues. And then on top of it as well, yes, joining with other states to say, come back. You know, Eric, one of the things we did not too long ago was and Steve Hilton and I did this in downtown Hollywood. What we did is we've noticed that, and this is a major issue that affects jobs and the economy in California, we've seen runaway production from Hollywood. And many people will say, oh, those are just rich people. Those are the movie stars. And no, it's not. These are like the Teamsters who drive the trucks. These are the caterers. This is the hair salons, the costume designers. These are good, stable, middle-class jobs that all contribute to one of the most important industries, economic basis of California, film production. And so much of it, because of the regulations, the negligence of it, you go to Hollywood and basically it looks like a ghost town today. Studios have packed up and left. There's no incentives to do filming in California. So these are lost jobs. Baywatch. This is so interesting. Baywatch. I mean, again, you think you need an ocean to film Baywatch. They actually packed up and left to go. I don't remember where they went, but they left, Southern California.
So what do we do?
Well, what we do is we work with them to say, let's figure out the tax incentives. How do we create the tax incentives to bring them back to downtown California to do film production here? Steve and I met with a number of people in the industry just saying, we can't get help from the Democrats. Will you help us? Yes, we can. But it's the commitment to say, we're going to focus on this. We're going to bring the jobs back. It starts with tax incentives. It starts with getting rid of so many of these regulations and the high cost of even filming, for example, in Southern California, to the point that Baywatch just says, we can't even afford to film on the beach anymore. That's unnecessary obstacles and blocking. So we can remove that. That is the power of a governor and a lieutenant governor with the focus on bringing jobs back. So that's one of the first things we would do. And when you think about California, people have an idea of what California resembles, but the idea of Hollywood, becoming a star, that is one of the things that oftentimes when people think of California, they think of beaches in Hollywood and Disneyland, and of course the great forests up north and Yosemite. But Hollywood is a major signal to the rest of the world, sort of the center of film production. So it's
I would say was. I don't know that it is. I'd say
well,
was.
I think it's worth fighting for. It still is. I would argue that it still is a major. When you ask people to describe what California is, they probably at some point will say in their top 3 items, "Oh, I think of Hollywood." The Hollywood Walk of Fame, but it's become covered with, prostitutes and drug addiction lately and homeless. So you're right in the sense that too many people have left Georgia, New Mexico, Nevada. They've gone internationally as well, but they don't want to leave. They want to come back, bring Hollywood home. And that's, Steve and I went to Hollywood. We did a press conference, sort of laid out some ideas of what we can do to bring production back. And when you bring production back, you revitalize these communities, you keep jobs at home, you provide an economic base, and we preserve the Hollywood dream as really still being in Hollywood.
You keep mentioning Steve, if assuming Steve Hilton is also elected, but that's not enough. We need a team. So who would be some of the other people that you would be on a team? Because no one person can make all the difference in fixing this state. We have to work together.
Right. And that's why we created what's called the golden ticket. Now, mind you, everybody has to run individually. Governor has to run on their own, lieutenant governor, attorney general, everybody runs individually. But what we did was something that we thought was very creative, because you're exactly right. We wanted to show that it takes a cabinet. It takes all of us working together. It takes not only a governor and a lieutenant governor, but you need an attorney general to basically enforce Proposition 36, an attorney general that will stand up for when the governor is able to do executive orders declaring, certain items or preserving Title IX. We need a controller as well that will be the person directly in charge of going after the waste, fraud, and abuse and opening up the books and leading the investigations. So Steve Hilton is running for governor. I'm running for lieutenant governor. Michael Gates is running for attorney general. And we have Herb Morgan running for controller. This is the core. I call it the fearsome foursome, the golden ticket, because it does take all of us working together. We can stand up. If one of the other ones falls by the wayside and they don't get elected, we still carry on. We still do the work that we can. But a system works best when it's united and it understands that this is a change election, that the voters are tired of the past. We're tired of, the gluttony in the budget, the bloat in the budget, the fraud, the waste, the abuse, and the arrogance of the current elected leadership of California towards the very people we're supposed to be working with and serving. So it takes a team, and that's why we call, that we're working all together. We have to run individually, but we're working as a team.
You were a Democrat, and you were in leadership, although I would say you were kind of a different kind of Democrat because you very much believed in parental rights and were an advocate for an education. What lessons did that give you? I mean, clearly you had a choice as to why you moved to the Republican Party, so I'm curious about that. But I'm also curious about how does that background help you?
I think it's an excellent question. And I think what I represent is so much of what Californians are deciding today. We have a Republican and a Democrat Party. And I will say to a large extent, both Republican and Democrat, we've seen reforms from within. Okay, changes. Today's Republican Party is not the same as what it was 20 years ago. Same thing for the Democrats. But one of the fastest growing sectors of the electorate, it's actually the no party preference. In other words, voters are saying, I don't want to be a Democrat or a Republican, but they haven't decided which one they want to be. So what I represent is somebody who says, yeah, I was a Democrat. As in the words of Ronald Reagan, who was a Democrat once upon a time as well, he said, I didn't leave the party left me. I was a Democrat that believed in basically what we call the John F. Kennedy party, the party of American exceptionalism, that we can do it. You pick yourself up by the bootstraps. My generation was the one that was challenged to say, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That was the Democrat Party that I grew up with and believed in and sustained for the longest time. And that's why I believed in school choice, fought for it. Unfortunately, the Democrat Party, by the time that I served in the legislature, had become so tied to the executive boards of the teachers unions, which are the most powerful political force in California, and really forgetting the needs of the parents and the kids. And that's why we see such dismal education statistics. So, I kept trying to think, I'm going to reform, I'm going to change, et cetera. And I worked alongside Republicans and Democrats in the legislature. If you go back and talk to people from the time I served, they know that I served with everybody. And in fact, I worked very closely once we no longer had monopoly party rule. Because remember, Arnold Schwarzenegger was elected in a recall of
Gray Davis.
And so I saw the power of what happens when you don't have mixed, just one party rule. Trying to turn off this phone and it won't stop. It's not, anyway, it'll stop ringing eventually. There it went. So anyways, so what are some of the lessons there? What I recognize is that even in a minority, because I was in the majority party, but I was a minority within the majority, and I was in leadership. People respected who I was, my character, my hard work. They trusted me on issues, didn't always like what I stood for, especially on education reform. But I was able, as a minority in a majority party, to keep pushing and advocating. And when the opportunity arose, when we had a Republican governor, to align myself with vast majority of Republicans who believed in school choice, parent rights, got a handful of Democrats to join me. We were able to run that bill to the governor's desk. And that's why I think today one of the major lessons that I look at is it's so important to break the supermajority, to have mixed government. Governments will become stagnant and fail when it's all just me too, me too, me too. Everybody just being quiet, following the leadership of above in one party rule where there's no dialogue, there's no debate, because you just know nothing will ever change. If we can break that and get some of us elected, and especially governor, lieutenant governor, we have a whole new opportunity to bring about change in California. So those are important lessons, I believe. But I think the most important thing is that Californians, I often tell people, look, we're not a blue state. And California is not a red state either. I call it the golden state, because when you look at voter registration, more and more people are saying, I really don't want to be involved with either party. I'm going to be independent, but everybody votes. And so the party that comes out with the most solid, practical, meaningful, like no BS message to the voters with honesty and integrity and hard work, we've got to make the pitch. I think we can prevail. And this is the year to do it.
This is unquestionably the year to do it. Your parents came from a working class background, and then you went on to get your PhD, kind of two ends of an extreme there. I would assume that upbringing very much affected kind of how you view the world. What is education? How did education change your world?
Education was everything to me. My mother, I give her and the dreams of my mother a lot of credit here for how education became so important to me. My mother had a 6th grade level of education. At that time, she had to drop out of school, basically go to work to help sustain her family. But she always believed and hoped that all of her children, there were six of us, six kids, she always hoped that each one of us would graduate from high school. I remember as well, she always made room at the kitchen table. We didn't have private rooms. We didn't have desks. We didn't have anything like that. We had a kitchen table, but she always made sure there was room at the table to do our work, to do our homework. She didn't understand it, but she knew it was important. So I give a lot of that credit to my mother. I did have opportunities. I did work hard. A lot of it was self-education, really working hard to become educated, to advance. I ended up earning a PhD. I did 2 postdoctoral fellowships at UCLA. I became a college professor and really advocated for students, working class kids like myself, who I believe, education, it's the key to the American dream. It is the ticket to prosperity. And with education, the world is open to us with education. So that's why I took that on as my issue. I never forgot my working class roots. That's why I so strongly advocate for working class, middle class individuals. Home ownership is key because it moves us forward, and education is the anchor to build not only strong communities, but also lessened crime. Did you know, Eric, as well, that when I was in the legislature, I also oversaw prison reform in the legislature. So I would go to most prisons in California, and it was always quite striking that 70% of inmates don't have a high school diploma. 70%. And again, too, I think, if you did the crime, you do the time. It doesn't absolve personal responsibility. But I met so many inmates, and that's why I supported education programs, because 90% of inmates will parole out. And the question becomes, how do we wish for them to parole out so you don't have the recidivism and them going back into the system again? So I believed and supported GED programs, the honor yards, as they were called, looking for rehabilitation, but they had to earn it themselves. And so those were important measures that I advocated for and supported, because a solid education also helps to reduce crime. If you've got, we used to say basically the best prevention against crime is a good job. And so we've got to fight for that as well. It boosts our community. It makes for safe neighborhoods. And that's what people want. They want safety and security, good jobs, access to the American dream, the California dream, starting with home ownership.
Regardless of party. Everybody wants this.
Exactly. And that's what Prop 36. I mean, if you take a look at that was widely supported across parties overwhelmingly. And that, at the heart of that was prevention of crime and looking again at some rehabilitation and training and getting people, back on track again. And yet this governor basically didn't fund it. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of just this poke in the eye. He didn't care what the people of California voted for. He just said, I'm not going to do it.
I think there's a moment of hope in the vote that happened on that Prop 36, though. 70% wanted it. We can get something passed if we show up. And all these people that talk about, well, there's cheating. Yeah, there's cheating in every system. We have a flawed system. But we can overcome it, and there is a place where it shows that we can overcome it. Voter ID, I think, would be essential, and that's on the ballot. Do you talk much about that?
Exactly. Voter ID, I think, out of everything on the ballot, I think voter ID is probably going to be the most significant and transformational use of our vote anywhere. And again, it doesn't solve everything, but it is a significant step forward. And all voter ID means is that you have to show your ID. You have to show that you are eligible to vote and that you are the person who you say you are. And that's across the board, Democrat, independent, Republican, white, black, brown, you name it. It's across the board, people supporting this. And so I think this is one of the most strongest things we can do. But I also think as well, while it opens the door, it doesn't end there. And a lot of people are discouraged. Look, I live in Los Angeles, and so many people are despondent over what they saw happen to Spencer Pratt, who ran for the mayor of Los Angeles, and I supported him as well. And not only just for the loss of Spencer Pratt, but the way, because we even saw video where we saw, the signatory gatherers for petitions going to the most vulnerable people on Skid Row and telling them, we'll give you $2 if you sign this petition, and here's the name. I mean, that is fraud. That is illegal. And thankfully, Bill Asaley, the U.S. District Attorney for California, is investigating that. So I think that that's going to be important overall. So we say help is on the way. We've got to make sure we change it, but we're not going to change the system if we don't get people in to actually change and implement the system that we want. Like Prop 36, people voted for it, but the people who control the levers of power in Sacramento, they refuse to implement it. If we win in November, not only will voter ID be there, but we can implement the intent, the spirit, the will, and the vote of the people to say, and we mean it. We want to see this implemented. So there's so much that can be done. Also, as well, too, I think people are tired of just, the fraud, the corruption that we've seen, the waste, the fraud, the abuse, the so-called leering centers of California in the hospices that are run, the bullet train to nowhere, and yet $200 billion that have gone out of the public, and that's what it's expected to cost. The unemployment insurance, people in prison were getting unemployment insurance. How is that happening? So there's so much waste and fraud, and yet where were our elected officials? It took Nick Shirley to come in and basically with his little camera to begin to capture imagery, not only in Minnesota with the leering centers, but then later in California. So the people understand what's going on, and the people are looking for change. This is a change election. And what we mean by that is when you look at the most reliable indicator of what the voters are thinking, it's as high as 55% to like 60% of Californians are saying California is on the wrong track and we need a change. That's what this election is about. And so we have an opportunity. I think we have a responsibility to go out and vote for what we believe and what everybody can say. Like, we call it the look around election. Look around and you'll see homelessness and poverty and waste and fraud and fires burning up our states, and the elected officials not having any accountability and denying responsibility. But it's up to us. As they say, that we have we have freedom for as long as we preserve it. We have a republic for as long as we can keep it. And it's up to us to vote, because complaining, that doesn't change anything. We've got to do something. And this election, and why I'm running, is because I believe we can do something and we must do something.
On day one, if you're elected, where do you apply your efforts first? Is there an easy win you can get as lieutenant governor?
Well, okay. So for day one for me will be you get sworn in, and right away I am going to sit down and meet with all 40 senators, because it's important, remember, right away to get the cabinet in place. What I believe may happen is that Steve Hilton and I are elected. Okay, the party in power for 16 years, one party monopoly rule, they're not going to walk away easily. And I anticipate there will be lawfare. I am going to use what I have to sit down to go and talk to each one of those 40 senators to say, here are the nominees. Let's get this going. We have to jumpstart the confirmation process. It may not sound like a very exciting thing to do, but that is job one right away, to get the confirmations out the door and rolling. We don't want to be waiting around and being jerked around as well, just saying you got to wait. We're saying no, the people voted, and so this is the cabinet. Let's get these hearings on the road. So that is actually going to be day one for me, is sitting down right away, leading, making sure that I'm talking to each one of those 40 senators, because it's going to be their votes that will see the fruition of our cabinet getting in place. And then, of course, too, I look forward to meeting right away with the UC regents, Title IX is the law of the land. That's what we're going to do. I'm going to protect the compacts that were negotiated actually by the Trump Department of Justice, Department of Education with UCLA, for example, to end the horrific anti-Semitism that we saw on our television sets right after, the October 7th, and basically looking at what we saw and the harassment of students just because they're Jewish, having to barricade themselves in the bathrooms and hallways at UCLA. I did 2 years at UCLA. That's a public university, and nobody based on skin color or national origin, religion, should ever have to be in fear of their life because of who they are. So those were compacts that were negotiated. That's going to be very important for me, fighting for meritocracy. So those are going to be some of the top 2 things right away, day one. But it'll be a full day, but we've got to get the government that the people voted for implemented and ready to do the work. That's kind of what we talk about, like the bowels of government,
right.
Basically getting everybody in place. But transportation, corrections, education.
Are these people already picked out? Has the golden ticket kind of looked at and vetted people, and you have people ready to go into those positions?
Some people have, for example, like the former congressman from the Central Valley, John Duarte, and these are nominations from the governor. Okay, but I agree with Steve on these points. That person has been selected to be nominated to be the Secretary of Water, environmental, resources. That's very important because water is a major industry. I mean, we will not have fields of food if we don't have water. We won't have urban centers with housing if we don't have a fair distribution. Just this past weekend, for example, as well, I had to put out an alert on social media. Did you know that right before the 4th of July, our state officials said, oh, golly gee, don't go into the water, like dun, 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 dun. And it's like, no, it's not Jaws preventing us from going in. It's because there was a massive sewage spill on a major beach in Orange County. And then all of the bacteria that's coming in from the sewage seepage, the seepage of sewage from Tijuana that was contaminating the San Diego basin, but it went from the Mexican border all the way up to Malibu. Yep. And so this was like the water. So this Secretary of Water Resources is critical. We need to get them in place right away. Okay. So some of them are being discussed. That's one of the ones that's been discussed.
We don't have time to do all of them. And I want to get in two things that are important because we're down to about 3 minutes. Okay. One is campaign information, like how to contact you. And the other one is, why are you hopeful? We're down to just under 3 minutes.
Okay, and I'm going to throw in a third one. I'm having an event actually in Fresno. I invite everybody to come July 20th, 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 at the Club One Casino. Steve Hilton is going to be my special guest, along with the wonderful comedian, the entertainer, Paul Rodriguez. Please join me there because it's in support of me for Lieutenant Governor. Where to reach me? GloriaJRomero.com, GloriaJRomero.com. Please join the campaign, volunteer, donate, invite us for a community meeting. We can do that. And why to be hopeful? Because I believe in the California dream. I am a product of the California dream. I believe you never give up. You fight, fight, fight. This is our land. Imagine it. Once upon a time, the Go West young man. People came from the East Coast. They believed in this land of opportunity. It was California. They settled here. Today, we find an exodus from California, and that's because they've given up on the California dream. We can turn this state around. It's up to the people. We have a strong constitution that gives rights to the people, and if we go out and vote in numbers that are too big to rig, we can have the golden state and the land of opportunity that we believe in. I think we do it for our family, for our children, for our grandchildren. We do it because our ancestors came here and had this promise for us. So I'm very hopeful. I believe that people are ready for change, and we are here to deliver that change. And I will be your next Lieutenant Governor, and I will work so hard to have earned your vote.
I sure hope you are elected. You will definitely have my vote. Folks, that was the 20th?
July 20th.
July
right.
20th, Club One Casino, which is, for my local people, that is in Fresno, just off of Cedar Avenue.
Right, Cedar Avenue. And it'll be a night of fun, entertainment, golden ticket. It'll be a lot of fun.
Now, that's on your website.
Yes.
And can you have your people send me a flyer of that for me to distribute on social media?
Absolutely. We'll send it as soon as we hang up.
Okay. I can also reach out to Deanne and make sure I get it. But I certainly wish you the best, and I appreciate you spending this time with me today.
Thank you. And I'd be so honored to earn the vote of all your listeners. And thank you for your support. It's us, the people, that will make the difference.
Amen to that. Folks,
Amen.
It's time to get out there and make a difference. We have all this freedom. It's actually liberty, not just freedom, meaning there's responsibility that comes with it. Your responsibility is to get out and vote. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist. Go out and make a difference today, folks.
I stand my ground.